day, everyone. On behalf of the Center for Hospitality Research, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. It's titled Sustainability in the Hospitality Industry, How Data is Making an Impact. My name is Jean Varney, and I'm a senior lecturer in the Peter and Stephanie Nolan School of Hotel Administration in the S.C. Johnson College of Business at Cornell University. Thank you all for joining us today. We have a really excellent panel with us today. It's a true international representation of hospitality industry companies that are coming to us today to talk about their thoughts on how they use data, how to optimize the use of data for sustainability and ESG performance in their companies and for the industry, really whether it's for an individual asset or even at the corporate level. So I'd like to take a moment here to introduce our wonderful panelists today. First, we have Tom Mellett, the Global Director of Decarbonization and Sustainable Performance from Accor. Thank you, Tom. All right, and then we have Eloisa Arita, the Head of Sustainable Strategy and Solutions at American Express Global Business Travel. Thank you. And then we have Eric Ricarte, who's the founder and CEO of Greenview. And then Arisha Shah, who's the Senior Director of Sustainability at Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. And then Emily Smith, Senior Director of Investor Relations and Corporate Responsibility at Park Hotels. Thank you. All right. So what we'd like to do is start talking a little bit about gathering data and some of the work we've been doing at Cornell with Greenview here. And Eric, I'd like to sort of kick it off to you to talk about some of the work that we've been doing with the Center for Hospitality Research and formalizing some of the gathering, analysis, and use of sustainability metric data.
Great. Thank you very much, Jean. And welcome, everyone. Pleasure to present as we are now in the 10th year initiative anniversary of the CHSB Index. So first starting, next slide, please. We are looking at the Cornell Hotel Sustainability Benchmarking Index. This is an industry-led initiative, basically got together a lot of the hotel chains 10 years ago and said, can we do an initiative that gives public data set benefit, that also gives a private benefit to the companies that participate, that is enabled for a large hotel chain down to a small individual property. And so we put together, as a collaboration between Greenview, the Cornell Center for Hospitality Research, and the Industry Advisory Group, this initiative. And we will share some of the opportunities that you have to use data and use the CHSB Index for your data needs, as a lot of companies do. So on the next slide, so we've now grown to over 31 participants, including participants in the audience today as well, which, as you can see, includes hotel owners, hotel operators, large chains, small, ranging the globe, who have come together to put data forth of energy, water, carbon, and now waste as we're going to pilot. So in the next slide, you can sort of see the trajectory. This is in the 2014, when we were able to publish our first data set, we were only able to gather data for a few thousand hotels, whereas now that has steadily increased over the years to where now we have over 25,000 hotels from 31 companies. And this has really enabled a robust set of data to be given to the industry for benefit. So how does this work, and what can we use the data for? On the next slide, please, will show the methodology. So first, hotel companies and hotels submit the data. We harmonize it in a series of segmentation and harmonization of units and metrics and those kind of things. We perform validity tests. We then, after segmenting and make sure there's minimum thresholds to give benchmarks, we then output the data. Now, what type of benchmarks and information is available? On the next slide, present this. So we have carbon, we have energy, we have water, and now we're piloting on waste. And we give this in intensity metrics, so you can see metrics on the standard HCMI, HWMI, which are the ways you can calculate the carbon footprint or the water intensity of a room night or meeting space. We do intensity by floor area, square meters, square feet, as well as occupancy per occupied room, and per room figures as well. So those are the sort of industry-specific metrics, whereas this is a very industry-specific benchmarking exercise. It's hotel-centric first, rather than sort of commercial buildings only. On the next slide, we segment then to give benchmarks by metro area, encompassing sort of an MSA national capital region, region, which can be a broader region, climate zones, as well as country level. And then next slide, we also segment this by industry-specific STR chain scale, media stars, asset classes, and hotel types and location segments to give a little bit more relevance by hotel type. Now, the validity testing process, which we built with the advisory group over the few years, in the next slide, which shows we make sure that the data are complete. We remove outliers based on a series of fences that are freely available as well. We look at ratios, and we look at year-over-year change or relative change within a period of the data. So that's we crunch all those numbers, and then what happens with it? Well, we output. So next slide, please. There is a public data set available, and we'll share the links in a little bit. But this public data set is a tool that you can access the data in bulk, and you can look up any country, market, geography. We have now over 600 of these, so where you can sort of see for each of the measures that we output, energy, water, carbon, per occupied room, per square meter, HCMI, HWMI metrics, and you can then see the range of performance. And so you can see what the lower quartile, upper quartile, low, high, and see the big range that is found in any market. Now, that's a publicly available data set that does not share the individual property data in this data form. But for participants, they get reports that are individually customized to each property. So the next slide, this is an example of a participant report where we give benchmarks that are specific to the metro area, but as well are specific to the attributes of the hotel across all climate zones, where we can give the intensities and we give your validity testing out for energy, water, and carbon. And then for portfolio users, in the next slide, we give portfolio reports that roll up the data, and then they can be used for integration into API or into other systems that can be used for the larger portfolio users. So that's really the premise of the data, is that we're able to have a data set that comes together, and then we can start to derive conclusions for the industry as well as for your own portfolio. A couple of nuggets, and I encourage you to check out the guidance document, which gives some of the findings. But on the next slide, just to give a few examples. So one of the interesting things in the United States is that water intensity was actually up between 19 and 21. Why? Because occupancies were low in 2021. And so one of the things we realized in the hotels that even though occupancies go down, water consumption doesn't go down uniformly. And so that's kind of one of these lessons learned from a big data set that we can then publicly sort of see. The other big finding we commonly find on the next slide is what we call the opportunity gap. When we take the data set and analyze it across any given market, we find that in the range, the lower quartile performer versus the upper quartile is about a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning the hotel that's 25 performer versus 75 performer in the market is twice as efficient. So there's always opportunity and room for improvement. And this is, for example, this is US markets that are full service non-resorts with in-house laundry. And you can see it's pretty consistent. Next slide. Let's go across the other side of the world for water per occupied room for limited service hotels. You can see that in Jakarta, for example, it's a 2.7 ratio. Bangkok is 4.3. And so what this really indicates is there is a range of performance and helps then give more details for how performance can be improved based on a yardstick of here's where the hotel is performing, and then others can use that and say, well, here are the things you can do to improve. So to wrap up, a couple of updates, how to participate on the next slide, please. So first, you can sign up by the link here and sign up, submit the participation form. We then give you the data form. The fees are very reasonable, so they're made in bulk, ranging from $600 for one hotel to $9 for a portfolio of hotels to make it economical and encourage bulk data. We then review the data with you, give you validity tests, and then we output it. So next slide on the timeline, the data participation is now open, but you need to submit data by end of August in order to have that data included in the data set. We will then give back the benchmarking reports by the end of the year, and then look to publish the full public data set guidance and other things in the first quarter of 2024. A couple of points, applications of the CHSB in the next slide. So this is are in place by a number of entities, hotels, businesses, buyers, and others. On the next slide, you can see that the data set has been integrated into the Scope 3 calculated for quantities for the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. UK governments, New Zealand governments, and other entities have been using the data sets for their own purposes, which we'll talk a little more. Now, what this enables as a part of industry collaboration data use on the next slide is we can take having common metrics such as HCMI putting them together in a public and freely available data set and outputting uniformly, we then convert that into an industry tool that can then serve and push out further. So next slide, we've created the hotel footprinting tool where anyone can go in and look and estimate the emissions of room nights and travel stays anywhere in the world. We then give that in bulk to travel buyers, intermediaries on the next slide, such as those who do offsetting, corporate travel management companies. This is a few, although there are several others who are now using this, and the list continues to grow as we can use the data for the various purposes across the myriad of needs across the value chain of hotels and travel. And then finally, on the final slide, outlook. Now, CHSB, in the 10th year, we're now taking it to more of a platform. So we will now be giving more analytics this next cycle, more participant guidance to help interpret the numbers. We're going to keep improving our segmentation with the help of our advisory group, as well as the validity testing. We're going to move to more of a platform approach to where there are data providers and data recipients, which includes property level participation output. There will be destination level participation enabled. And we will be doing this along a parallel enhancement of the updating of the industry methodology for measurement, which is the HCMI 3.0. So lots of good stuff, and looking forward to working with you. We welcome everybody's participation and everybody's use of the data. And thank you very much for the time. Back to you, Jean.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Eric. That was awesome. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the morning here. So I thought I'd kick it off to the panelist group here, sort of an overarching question about if each of you could just take a minute to talk about how sustainability data sort of works in practice in your own companies, and how do your companies use sustainability related data? So Tom, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, and pleasure to join the group today for this presentation discussion, and really emphasize, I guess, the importance and value of the CHSP data set. So just to introduce Accor. So Accor is a French-based international hotel company with almost 6,000 hotels operated under about or more than 40 brands in more than 100 countries. So operating on a global scale. And we've had an environmental reporting program in place for almost 20 years now. So we've been on this path for a long time. However, it's important to say that increasingly the interest and value that people are seeing indirectly and directly in the data is obviously growing. And quite simply, it's a question of if you do not measure it, you cannot manage it, and therefore you are leaving value on the table. So it's when it comes to environmental data, it is the means to the end. So for our core, our focus is really on the outcome, which is driving environmental performance. And so it's important to collect that data to then inform the business decision and management process to then get to that outcome of driving performance. So in terms of where we are for Accor, how do we go about collecting and managing our data? So we have a reporting tool in place called Gaia. And so it's a tool that all of our hotels kind of log into each month and load their information. Collecting data from hotels, so you've got city hotels, you've got hotels that are on islands on their own somewhere, real massive diversity, which presents a lot of challenges often in terms of helping them to onboard them, to get them to report their data. But we have a big focus on data quality. And today we treat environmental data at the same level as financial data. And the reason for that is really that this data and it links to the credibility of our brands. And it's important that if we're making statements and claims around performance, we have that data to support that. So that ties into, for example, legislation, which is approaching in Europe, as well as other kind of frameworks and reporting processes that are in place as well. So at a property level, basically the hotels submit their data, it gets crunched and processed in our reporting tool. And we have a big focus within the business on, for example, emissions reduction, as well as obviously optimizing our energy use. So the largest source of emissions is actually the energy that's used by hotels. And so energy is also the second largest operating cost for hotels. So it's both has a big environmental impact and benefit for acting on it, as well as a commercial benefit and performance opportunity as well. So putting energy, with water and waste, these other kind of KPIs, which the methodologies help us to track and share the data on. The collective, like kind of P&L impact, which these topics represent in a hotel's budget, for example, is around 10%. So it's really quite material to a hotel's both business as well as its environmental impact. And so we see the CHSB, once the data is collected, we can benchmark hotels against each other. So we can compare an IBIS against an IBIS or a Fairmont against a Fairmont. But increasingly, we're also using the HCSB data set to basically benchmark the performance of our properties also against the other competitor hotels, which we know are kind of neighboring hotels, to drive some friendly competition and performance as well.
Hey, thank you so much. All right, Emily.
Hi, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're all thrilled to be here. I'll just give you a little bit of background about Park Hotels and Resorts. So we are a full service lodging real estate investment trust. We are actually a spinoff from Hilton. Hilton spun out their real estate arm in late 2016, early 2017. So we have been a public company since January 2017. And we are very proud of the fact that we've been able to publish our sustainability related data every year that we've been a public company, thanks to our partnership with Eric and Greenview. And so just thinking about how we use sustainability data. So at Park, we currently have 46 hotels. They're all domestic here in the United States. But we do have some rather large hotels. So some of them are up to 3,000 rooms. So they kind of vary in footprint. And so we kind of take a much more granular approach because we've got a smaller footprint than obviously some of the brands and other people on this call. And so we're really looking at the data to help drive. They are financial decisions and they're also sustainability related decisions. So we're looking at things like what are our hotels that use the most energy? Which are hotels that could have old aging systems. And so you're looking at it from a financial perspective, but you're also looking at, okay, this will give me the opportunity to implement a new system, something that's more efficient to kind of improve our overall footprint. So from an environmental perspective, we're looking at it from just from the return that we'll get, both financially and in a sustainability lens. We also look at the data to kind of determine what is our risk footprint. So thinking about climate change and resilience, so we've got assets that are located in coastal areas. And so we're looking at sea level rise. And so we look at our portfolio and we have relative risk scores, which, this impacts a lot of our investment decisions. It impacts our insurance, it impacts sustainability. So we're looking at the data to kind of understand, what are some of the risks that will face our portfolio in the future? What can we be doing now? And how does that change our approach potentially to where we want to be located, by, let's say by 2050. And then, so not to ignore the other side of the ESG data, but we're also always looking at any of the DEI data that's out there, the social data. There's a lot of information that's out there in the public sphere. And so we look at that data and it helps us, it drives our policies to see okay, do we have the same sort of supportive and employee-friendly policies that some of our peers have? So we're constantly looking at the data and benchmarking just to be sure that we're doing the best that we can to be good corporate citizens.
Great, thank you so much. Rishi.
Thanks, Jean. Pleasure to be here with all the panelists, and hope everyone's having a great day so far. A little background on Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. So we spun off of Wyndham Worldwide 5 years ago, 5 years ago, and we are really an asset-light company, one of the largest hotel franchising companies globally. We have over 9,000 hotels spread across 95 plus countries, and we span the gamut from economy all the way up to upscale. However, we do command a leading presence in the economy and mid-scale space. But we do operate 24 brands across the globe. And as I said earlier, we are asset light, so we don't own any hotels. So a lot of what we do is all about influencing and educating our franchisees on how to embrace sustainability so that they can reduce their environmental impact, while also reducing their operating costs as well too. So from a data perspective, really data serves as a foundation for our Wyndham Green program. We provide all of our franchisees with access to our Wyndham Green toolbox so that they can measure and track their utility performance, because it's so critical, as Tom mentioned earlier. Utilities is the second highest operating cost for hotels after payroll, but it's something that they can easily manage and better get a grip of. And so what we did was we rolled out the Wyndham Green program and our internal certification to really provide a roadmap for hotels to approach sustainability in a practical way. And that data comes in really handy because as they progress through that certification level, they could see how they're improving over time and how they're reducing their environmental impact. So it's really critical that our hotels and all the hotels are really measuring what they do, because as Tom said, if they don't measure what they're doing, they don't know how they're doing. So it really is a critical piece in that sustainability journey.
Great, thank you so much. Eloisa. You're on.
I'm muted, I know. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jean, for the opportunity to be here in this very important panel to discuss this key topic. So a little background on American Express GBT. Amex GBT is the world's leading business partner for managed travel. We do help companies and their employees prosper by making sure travelers are present where and when it matters. We do keep global business moving with the powerful backing of travel professionals in over 140 countries, so a very strong global presence. Our clients, which are corporate companies of all sizes and in all places, rely on GBT to provide travel management services, organize meetings and events, and deliver business travel consulting. Our ESG and sustainability programs are very much at the core of our business, shaping everything from our partnership with suppliers to our client solutions and, of course, our technology. So the data, sustainability data, is, of course, critical in our strategy and embedded in, I would say, three core areas or with three core purposes. One being the corporate reporting piece. So, of course, for our clients and for us as a travel management company, sustainability data, and specifically hotel sustainability data, are value chain emissions. So for us, they would sit under Scope 3 category, which is a category that we report on since 2019. And in general, in the industry, there is obviously an increasing need to report on Scope 3 from a regulatory perspective, of course, but in general to show investors, client data as a proxy for how well our company or companies in general are managed. Another purpose for sustainability data is the supply chain selection and onboarding. So we need to be able to identify and categorize all our suppliers and vendors, but specifically hotel properties and chain based on sustainability criteria, and ensure they meet our high ESG and sustainability standards and practices that align also with our clients' requirements. And last but not least, sustainability data is key to help our clients make sustainable choices at point of sales, but also to educate. So as mentioned, the two segment of clients we would have and provide data for is business travelers when they book their trips and hotel stays through our technology platforms. They need sustainability data at point of sales to take sustainable decisions. For the meetings and events piece, it follows a similar approach. So sustainability data needs to be embedded in our technology when hotel properties are selected. But there's, and this would be like a first filter, but there's a second set of data that is very important, and it's more the qualitative data once the event or meeting is property is engaged. So this would be more educational purpose for our clients.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is great information. And Eric, In addition, I know you work with the CHSB, but your other clients too have different needs for data use. How do you use data?
Well, of course, we use data to prepare those wonderful ESG disclosures that everybody loves. But other than that, two of the things we work a little bit unique in the data. One of those sort of attributes or best practices, we use data to try to build FOMO among hotels. So we can give them a benchmark and say on the qualitative side, you don't have variable frequency drives in your kitchen hood fans, but 70% of your market does. That is what can actually motivate to do it, even without an exact percent ROI ability. So that's one. The other, we actually, in our Greenview portal software for the company, for the hotels, we actually focus on social data first, and we put that front and center, because the community impact, the volunteering, the donations, all the action activities they can do to help motivate the team carry out programs so that they'll enter in the environmental data we also need.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so the next question I have is really sort of honing in on data that what might be considered, most relevant right now that you're looking at. So Eloisa, could you start us off with kind of talking about what data is making sense and being most relevant right now to your clients? Oh, mute.
Sorry. So we know the sustainability data is not an easy topic. And the way we see the most important data that matters to us is, of course, hard data, specific hard data related to the carbon emissions for the contracted services with the hotel. It depends if it's a business traveler, it can be the couple of room nights, or from a meetings and events perspective, the carbon emissions related to the whole event. So this would, of course, include the emissions generated by plastic waste and other elements. Another very important, and this, I have to say, of course, the Cornell benchmarking data is a critical factor to our data, because either we receive the data, the actual data from the properties, which does not happen very often, I have to say, to date, or we can also calculate the data based on this, benchmarks. Very important data is also the third-party verified credentials. So credentials, commitments, certification. So more and more corporations, including American Express GBT, have sustainability targets at supply chain level, such as having 25% or 50% of preferred hotels certified by 2025. And we know certifications can be of different nature, but the important matter here is that they're verified by third parties, and we will give a little bit more detail later. In terms of supply chain selection and onboarding, so going beyond the corporate reporting purposes, I would say same as the above, but it's interesting to understand the internal sustainability management programs from the properties and their own sustainability targets. So basically to understand if they have a net zero journey and plans to measure and reduce their emission. And finally, to help our travelers and meeting owners make sustainable choices and also nudge them, because it's not only about, getting the data, as Eric said, but it's just about, influencing and nudging our ecosystem to travel more sustainably. So here, I think technology is important. So again, we come to the hard fact. So is the hotel certified or not certified, which will ultimately mean it's sustainable or not sustainable, right, today. And then ideally carbon emissions and more waste at point of sales. And I would say these are the most impactful data today. When we go to the meetings and events piece, I think more detailed data on internal initiatives, so the story behind the data gets more and more important, and the purpose here is more, educational, and also, increase engagement of the travelers during the hotel experience.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's a lot of information too. Great. All right, Emily, could you give us an ownership perspective?
Sure. So my perspective is a little bit kind of taking a step back. So it's not really about the outcome of the data. We're at the stage where we're looking at like what goes into that data and is that accurate. So we're really focused on accuracy right now, which I would say is something that's kind of come along a little bit later in our journey, right? So we started reporting in 2017. And but we just want to be sure that our data is accurate, it's solid. And there are so many different metrics that are out there and different ways to look at things that it really kind of complicates things. Like, I mean, take building square footage, for example. This is one of our big pet projects this year. You would think it'd be something very straightforward, that everybody would know the exact square footage of their hotel and know what goes into the calculations to drive anything like your carbon emissions, your energy intensity, all of that. No, actually, the square footage can vary based on who you're reporting to. And, like, are you including your outdoor garage space? Are you including your underground garage space? And, for some purposes, does it include outdoor meeting space? Is it a permanent structure? Is it not? So we're at that stage where we're really trying to understand, hey, like, do we have good data? Do we have the foundation and the fundamentals in place so that we can then turn out this data that actually supplies many of the people who are on this call, that drives their data that they can then roll up. So that's really our challenge right now. And, that involves things like, we have hotels that are, some of them that are over 100 years old. So, you go down into the basements of those hotels and you're wondering, like, is everything being accounted for here? Or are there old utility meters that might be there that, we don't know, are they turned on, and which one goes to a tenant, which one belongs to us, which is our scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So that's kind of where we are this year, is really trying to dig in, and because we want to have that confidence that our sustainability data is just as accurate as the financial data. And a lot of this could start coming, of course, with any sort of SEC legislation where a lot of this will be regulated. We just want to have that foundation that then will really supply any sort of targets that we put out there, any sort of net zero goals, just so we have that confidence going forward. Eloisa mentioned waste. That's another thing. Like, waste data is all over the place. You could get, and sometimes we ask our hotels to report it, and the numbers you get back are just sometimes they just don't make any sense, and it's because people don't understand it yet, and we don't really have the metrics in place or the systems in place to really accurately measure the different types of waste that might be there, what's going to composting, what's being recycled, and like, how's that being measured? Are they weighing the whole thing, or are they actually taking an inventory of it? So what matters most to us right now is really just like, do we have the foundation and the building blocks in place? And it is definitely a work in progress. So hopefully once the SEC legislation comes out, hopefully this will help all of us kind of move forward and feel a little bit more confident in the data.
Great, thanks. Thanks for that honest perspective, because I think a lot of companies have the same concerns and the same approach that you have of uniformity, and the problem with, hotels, there's even, 200 room hotels are not the same, and getting everyone into that uniform system and accuracy is very, very challenging. Definitely commend your work. Thank you. All right, so for the next question, thank you, everyone. I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of external communication and how you might communicate some of your ESG information and data. And there's a lot of work that goes into collecting and analyzing, but then how is it communicated out from there? And Rishi, would you like to start with that?
Thanks, Jean. Yeah, with stakeholders' increased need for transparency around ESG data and climate change, that communication piece is so critical. And every stakeholder is looking at the ESG data in a variety of different ways. But one of the most common ways we disseminate our ESG data is through our annual ESG report, where we're sharing more information about our organization, what our hotels are doing around the environmental, social, and governance aspects. And that seems to be one method of communication that resonates well with a broader audience of stakeholders, whether it's shareholders, team members, say maybe some guests, suppliers, partners. But that's generally usually the most broadest audience we touch. But when it comes to shareholders, they really want to get into the nitty gritty. They want to see what are the environmental metrics. So how are you managing your risks? What governance do you have in place? So that's where we really leverage, participating in environmental disclosures like CDP response to climate change and water security, because they really get into the weeds there and will really analyze what we're doing from a governance perspective, what is our strategy, and what are the metrics. But then also, looking at some other stakeholders that are really important to us are our hotels, our franchisees. For them, we share with them their own environmental performance in our Wyndham Green Toolbox dashboard so that they can see how they're performing over time, to see whether there are any hiccups or any spikes in usage, or see how they're improving and reducing the environmental impact. And then I think another important stakeholder we need to look at is companies, corporations. Companies are increasingly looking for more sustainability data and more metrics, and that the need for transparency has only increased over the last 3 years. If you look at RFPs from corporations over the last 15 years, it's grown from 3 questions to over 48 questions around sustainability and diversity. And so now hotels are really challenged to really try to provide as much information to these corporations as possible so that they could put their best foot forward to compete for that business. And these companies, as they're making these travel buying decisions, they're increasingly being influenced by those companies' sustainability departments. So they are really analyzing and looking in that data. And so it becomes really critical that our hotels have the ability to leverage what Eric mentioned earlier, their standard methodologies of measurement, HCMI, HWMI, the hotel waste methodology, to really standardize how we as an industry look at these sustainability metrics and report it consistently. So depending on who the stakeholder is, we're leveraging that ESG data in a variety of ways.
Great, thank you so much. Tom, how about the other brand perspective with Accor?
Thanks. So I echo those comments. We obviously come from it from a very similar perspective, so seeing the same dynamics in the market. So likewise, at the hotel level, it's really about helping the hotel understand what their consumption is in terms of energy, water, emissions from waste, emissions from both waste as well as carbon emissions, and basically helping them to then increasingly also use that data to build a business case for investment in energy efficiency projects and driving investment back into their properties. So it's not just a question of the current reporting and data that they collect now and the historic perspective. It's also the perspective looking forward and thinking about how they can use that information to drive their performance, and therefore aligning with different things like carbon reduction targets, science-based targets, all that sort of thing, how you can use your asset and what the tangible actions that need to be put in place in order to achieve those targets. At the kind of rolled up corporate level, so again, similar, we obviously produce our annual reporting, which is the major source of publication of a kind of consolidated view of Accor's carbon footprint and environmental metrics, sustainability metrics, social metrics across the business. But we also then participate in a large number of different kind of ESG reporting programs, CDP, TCFD, SASB, DJSI, Alphabet Soup, you guys are probably all familiar with. And so ultimately, this is being demanded certainly on the investor side in terms of Accor's shareholders. So it's really critical that we are being responsive and also trying to get ahead all the time of those different frameworks that are emerging. So, for example, we have a big focus on plastic as well as on nature and biodiversity. So those are kind of the next evolution. At the moment, the energy, water, and waste, that's very much focused on the property. It's not looking upstream of the property in terms of, for example, food is one of for Accor and other hotel groups, is usually the second largest source of emissions. So thinking more widely about that data set as well. In terms of more widely, a large part of the rooms that are sold to our guests are through online travel agents, and so they also increasingly are, I guess, expecting, demanding Accor to provide some of this information. So we're always kind of engaging with them and really kind of, I guess, drive the process forward. So there's different initiatives like the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, which is a forum where the industry is kind of coming together to kind of look at what the kind of best practice approaches that can be put in place at an industry level to really kind of address these topics. And it goes to the point that data on its own is not the solution in the sense that more data is not necessarily better. It's about the quality data and data that actually meets a targeted kind of option. And there are many, many different ways that you can slice the apple or orange or whatever fruit you want to choose. And the problem with that is that we can kind of get lost in that detail. And so it's very important that we can kind of stand back and look at the data in a more macro perspective. And ultimately, what are our objectives? And then put in place the right kind of actions to collect the data that's needed that can then ultimately inform decision making and ultimately unlock value for our hotel owners, as well as helping our guests, for example, to choose the right hotel that's relevant for them, which reflects their targets around or their personal preferences around reducing their own emissions. So there's a big focus on frameworks like the CHSB at the kind of macro consolidated level, but HCMI, HWMI, these around carbon and water reporting and new waste reporting methodologies. It's very much about standardization and having a kind of common set of metrics that everybody can be using. And also the question then is that we receive requests from literally thousands and thousands of stakeholders each year that are asking for this information. And so the other part is really around how we can, in a sort of systematic way, be efficient in how we share that information so it's getting to the people that are interested in accessing that data. And so that's, I guess, a key part for us, how we think about how we communicate this information at the right place at the right time for the relevant stakeholders that we're working with.
Thank you so much, Tom. And Emily, you have a bit of a different audience that you communicate with. How do you find that Park is working with ESG communication?
Sure. Well, actually, what Tom was just referencing, I mean, there are so many requests from various stakeholders, and for us, our stakeholders include obviously our employees, our brands, whomever, and then our investor base. And I also work in investor relations, and that's actually one of the reasons that ESG kind of sits at Park in the investor relations group, is because it's a significant source for some of the questions and kind of driving some of the things that we respond to. But it's really challenging to whittle it down and to figure out what to respond to. And I'm talking more about the ESG frameworks at this point, because there are so many requests. And, at Park, it's like a team of one plus Greenview, our consultants, but it's really challenging, like nobody really has the resources to respond to every single request. So it's kind of looking at where the industry is headed and what you think are the most relevant ones that will tell your story the best. Absolutely agree that publishing an annual corporate responsibility or ESG report is a key part of that, because that allows you to tell like the social side, a little bit more of the narrative of what your company is doing versus just like a, check the box, enter the data here sort of thing. So we see that as our opportunity to tell Park's corporate responsibility story. We also do put information up on our website that details all of this. But then it's been really just like picking and choosing the most relevant frameworks that we think have kind of become more standardized and more widely accepted. So we do report to SASB. We report, we have a GRI index. We have a TCFD disclosure as well. Those are all included in our ESG report, and it's also on our website. And then we also respond to GRESB, which is the Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, which is relevant for actual owners and compares us to real estate companies throughout the world. And that's it, to be perfectly honest, that is all we have the capacity for right now. So that kind of drives our ESG reporting. Is a lot of it is bandwidth. And the hope that there's been a lot of consolidation and standardization in the industry, and that's a wonderful thing. And so hopefully people will be able to pull the data from these various public sources, and just because there's no need for us to be reporting to 10 different places the exact same information, right? So, so we're really hoping that we're kind of moving in the right direction. And for the most part, we think our investors are on board with our approach, and that they're able to gather their relevant information based on what's publicly available.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, we've got a couple of audience questions we might want to sneak in here. And the first one's actually for Tom. And Tom, it says, since reporting has started, what has been the reduction seen within your hotels?
Going back the 20 years, I don't actually have the specific number to mind. I'd have to review that one. The complexity with measuring a metric like that is really the fact that our portfolio has evolved. So like Accor as a business in the last 20 years has gone from probably being a couple of thousand hotels up to 6,000 hotels. So at a macro level, the emissions have quantitatively increased naturally. But certainly at a property level, there's been significant reductions. So I think it would be more than 20% at least over that period of time. So substantial in terms of reductions, but certainly a long way short of where we need to get to in terms of aligning ourselves with the Paris Agreement and the kind of 1.5 degree trajectory which is needed, which is more in line with a 46% reduction by 2030. So significant progress so far, but much more to be done in terms of reducing our footprint and aligning ourselves with the targets of, for example, our corporate clients that also have science-based targets and commitments.
Thank you so much. And Eloisa, there's one for you here. When an end user is booking travel on your platform, can they see the sustainability data? And if so, what kinds of information do they see?
Good question. So the answer is yes. Our technology platforms allow to see a flag for sustainability properties and also carbon emissions at point of sales. I'd say long story behind the short answer, and this is something we might discuss in a few minutes, is what is a sustainable property, right? And I think this question reflects what corporate end users, travel management companies are actually looking for, which is a yes or no answer to, is this property sustainable? When it's very difficult actually to say yes or no, right? But ultimately, it's what consumers, I would say, are requiring. So technology allows it, yes. And additionally, I shall say, we're enhancing technology to allow certain emission reduction features for the properties and chains that can provide us, like avoidance of single-use plastic. So you can kind of tick a box if you want to stay in a property like that, or programs like hotel and sheet reuse programs, vegetarian dishes available, and I think 3 or 4 features like that.
Great, thank you so much. And we do have one more question here that's sort of interesting. It's talking about green certification bodies and trying to align measuring and data gathering and reporting relevant sustainability data, and can the industry somehow align a little bit more with data gathering with I think some validation of some of these certification systems. Has anyone taken a look at that in the group? Yeah, and if so, feel free to unmute.
So I can speak from from our American Express GBT perspective in the industry. The way we look at certifications, we have a partnership with GSTC, which is the Global Sustainability Tourism Council. So we do recognize the importance of verified third-party certification in our sourcing strategy. And we do promote GSTC certifications that are verified and accredited by GSTC. And there's, a whole myriad of them. It's not like 4 certifications. I would say the most renowned ones, and I'm not going to mention any specific, but sit under the GSTC umbrella. And if I'm not wrong, but please correct me if I am, I think it's the only kind of global body to verify and accredit certifications. And they also have their hotel sustainability criteria, which is kind of the pathway to get certified. So I think this is a very good reference in the industry. As per the measurement, I think the industry is still working on an aligned measurement, and I shall mention from a very specific segment, which is the meetings and events corporate segment, that Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative, which is a UN-backed initiative regrouping stakeholders from all different areas. And Eric is nodding as Greenview is a key player in this initiative. And we're actually working towards building, frameworks and methodologies for all event areas, and of course, the hotel piece being a key one. And we hope to have some good outcomes. I think by the end of years, right, Eric?
Yeah, for COP this year.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. All right. So I have a question for you, Tom. How does CHSB recognize hotels that are buying green energy to reduce their emissions?
Thank you for the question. So maybe just to slightly rephrase this question and think about it in terms of decarbonization for hotels. So today, most of the major hotel groups, as well as all of our corporate travel, corporate clients, so 70% of more than 70% of Accor's strategic corporate clients are setting or have set science-based targets in order to reduce their emissions. So it means that collectively, all of these businesses have set this ambition to reduce their footprint in line with the Paris Agreement. And so it's a real, coming together of business collectively to focus on this sort of single objective. And so for hotels, there's 2 main mechanisms that exist for them to really reduce their scope 1 and 2 emissions. And one is obviously around energy efficiency and energy performance, which is a big focus for us, as well as, of course, the second option is how you then decarbonize your energy source. So I'm probably going to throw this question to Eric. So today, this HCMI, as the Carbon Measurement Initiative, provides a framework for businesses to calculate, hotels to calculate and report their emissions, but the CHSB dataset doesn't provide that mechanism. So the question for us is really then about how can we better highlight as an industry this preference in terms of helping our clients as well as our businesses to reduce their footprint by buying this green energy, and then making sure that we have the right mechanisms in place to highlight that value and investment that those hotels are making. But Eric, if you've got any follow-up comment on that, it'd be great to hear your view.
Of course, thank you, Tom. And this is CHSB in action. You see the advisory group supporting the constant improvement of CHSB. And again, things need to be agreed upon and commonly defined. And so things are evolving. When we first did HCMI 10 plus years ago, there was no scope 2 protocol, and buying renewable energy wasn't allowed in the general thick of things. We had to first redo, so HCMI 2.0, we now got that in there, and that is now acceptable. And now we do have a metric and a measure, which is the percent of energy from renewables. And now, starting with this next cycle in CHSB, we're able to now benchmark that, so there can be a benchmark metric of what percent of your hotel's energy comes from renewable sources. And so that's one of these enhancements that will then have to take up, like as you mentioned, a bigger role, because that metric on itself is ultimately one of the key drivers of decarbonization. So that's where we're looking to go with this for CHSB in this next cycle. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right. So the next question I have here is for Rishi. And I think this is something that a lot of properties and companies face. What are some of the key challenges or obstacles organizations typically face when it comes to collecting and benchmarking sustainability data? and how can it be overcome? Maybe an example or two.
Sure. Thanks, Jean. And I think this goes back to what Emily said in the beginning of this webinar, was focusing on quality and accuracy of data. You know, for a global organization like us at Wyndham, with hotels in 95 plus countries, that becomes very important because you have utility bills in numerous languages, different unit of measurements, different sources of utilities, different sources of energies. So being able to best track what sources of energy are being used, what unit of measurement they're captured in, it becomes very important. And I think the two ways that this can be overcome is, one, education and awareness, continuing to make, especially when you're relying on manual entry, teaching the hotels how to read utility bills and how to input them properly. The second piece is, I think, being open to exploring new technologies. I think, leveraging artificial intelligence, leveraging OCR technology to automate some of that, to make it simpler, can definitely help overcome some of these challenges and obstacles that we face as an industry.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, mute. Okay, thank you so much again. Let's see. Emily, I know you have a great question here about all parties. How can all parties that are owning and running hotels, brands, managers, how can they all work better to help meet sustainability needs for the stakeholders? So managers, brands, owners, there's so many parties involved. How can they all work together more to meet sustainability needs for properties and for the companies?
Sure. Thanks, Jean. The biggest thing is, let's talk. We are all working, sustainability teams tend to be a little bit lean at this stage in the game for most organizations. We are all working toward our company goals. But the thing is, they are all global goals, right? We're all working towards the same thing. And so it really makes sense for us to collaborate more and to talk more, because we're especially when we're thinking about management companies and brands and an owner, all of our initiatives feed into our output, right? So let's meet, let's talk, let's collaborate, let's talk about how the capital that we're putting towards these things, how they can actually fund everyone's goals. And I think right now, probably just the way that sustainability and ESG reporting has really kind of taken off in the past few years, I think it's just more of a product of resources and teams just not having the bandwidth and capacity. But I think this is just a really important time to really start those conversations so that we can all work together. There's no need for us to be duplicating efforts. I welcome the future collaboration. Events like these are great, and just getting to meet more people and discussing.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And Eloisa, could you provide sort of your perspective on maybe how, as an industry, we can be more aligned with our approach and walk in the same direction?
Yeah, I kind of answered this one earlier with, GSTC, Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative. I think we really need to align from a holistic perspective as an ecosystem, because I think one of the outcomes of our conversation today it is how difficult it is from a hotel chain perspective to have a unified approach and set out, to data or say yes, no, this is sustainable or not sustainable, right? And on the other side of the equations, we have the at least from a corporate perspective, but I believe the leisure hotel consumers is kind of the same. So it's most of it goes through technology platforms today, where you can make a couple of choices, right? So, or you have 1 flag, 2 flag, 3 flags for sustainability level. So how do we all get together and follow the same standards, understanding the complexity of it, but kind of regrouping the efforts by tiers, so that we, from a consumer perspective, we can have a more straightforward vision and really channel kind of the right decisions correctly. So I did mention, from the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative is a very important one. Again, from a business travel perspective, we have GBTA, doing great stuff in terms of sustainability and aligning, I'd say standards or RFP questions, because this is another thing. I'm not going to go into that one. And yeah, certifications, and then the measurement as discussed with Eric earlier.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. So Eric, could you sort of bring it home for us with, where is sustainability data headed in the future, and what do you really see on the horizon?
Well, I mean, Horizon is busy, as I think every one of my panelists here at the battlegrounds, the forefront of what's going on. But quickly, data is going to be more serious, regulated. They need to be audited, verified. Looking under the hood, as Emily mentioned, that's what's on the horizon. Second, waste. Biggest focus on waste data. The myriad of impacts that waste represents, upstream, downstream, guest, everything, is going to be a focus. So we're going to see a big focus on getting that waste data correct and figure out how to measure really well. Scope 3 emissions. Scope 3, the infamous Scope 3 is the combining transversal factor across all industries. Big focus on Scope 3, not just the emissions from my energy, but the emissions from the stuff I buy upstream and downstream. Risk, Emily mentioned as well. Metrics and data on the risks of hotels, the climate risk, water risk, all the various risk metrics. Bigger play toward biodiversity data is going to be a big focus next year, with more understanding that it's not just carbon, it's the entire ecosystem we need to focus on and look at metrics for. And then finally, just a bigger use of the data all over, where we're seeing there's so much more use and request, and so it's going to be a big lift, and everybody's going to be looking at data, more solutions, more providers, more things. But I'll just say this is really it's a sustainability, it's a growing pain for data. And there is no panacea. There's no full automation, full solution. And it really is, as Emily and Louisa mentioned, collaboration. So getting together with peers, bodies like GSTC, Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, Net Zero Carbon Emitter Initiative, even local hotel associations. A lot of the things we're seeing in Asia work with Singapore Hotel Association, Phuket Hotel Association, coming together at the local level to try to figure some of these things out. So those are some of the positives, but there will be a lot more work needed on data going forward as it gets more serious.
Great, thank you. Well, we are out of time. So just want to say thank you so much to everyone today for joining us. For our panelists, thank you so much for providing all of this information. Again, for the CHSB information, you could go to the eCommons website. We'll have that link up also on the registration page for more information. And once again, Tom, Eloisa, Risha, Emily, and Eric, appreciate your time so much, and all the great work that you're doing that is so desperately needed. So everyone, have a great day, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Good team.
Thank you.
Thank you.